Hi. Corona restrictions have been tough on all of us this last year, and it's made it especially hard to put this video together because unfortunately we're in the UK and our truck is in Colombia because we had to come home because of the pandemic. But we hope you enjoy it. We hope it gives you a bit of an insight into how we constructed our vehicle and the rationale behind some of our decisions. Cheers. Once we decided we were going to go down the truck route to build our camper, we started looking around at various trucks, MAN, DAF, Mercedes and so on, all of which were very good trucks. But for some reason we kept coming back to the Mercedes, in particular model 1017A, which is a four-wheel drive, all-round sort of German army cargo truck. They made thousands of them for the German army. They're not an off-road vehicle, but they're going to tackle bad roads, and they're probably more capable than I am. What comes along. So we started looking to try and buy one in Germany, and we struggled. We really struggled. We looked at loads and loads and loads in auctions, and we couldn't get any of them. We kept bidding and we kept losing and not getting anything. And in the end, a very good friend of ours located one, which was parked in the backyard of a company that made water tanks. And we went and looked at it, and it was perfect. It was absolutely original in its camouflage color, and it looked exactly what we wanted. It only had 52,000 kilometers on its clock, so that was perfect for us too. We did the deal, we bought it, and we got the guy who we were buying it from to remove the flatbed off the back because we didn't need that bit. And he also changed the tires and wheels from dual tires on the back up to 22.5-inch rim, singles all round, which is what we wanted. The vehicle itself is 1988. It's a 5.7 litre straight six diesel engine that puts out 170 horsepower, which actually isn't that much. We feel it on the hills. It is a turbocharged engine, and the engine itself is called the OM352A, and it's a very, very common engine. They put it in agricultural machinery, boats, and many vehicles, including Unimogs. It's got, ordinarily it's two-wheel drive, but you can change to four-wheel drive. And when you do this, it drops the ratio down to a lower ratio, which obviously helps it in tougher conditions. When we originally got the vehicle, it had a medium ratio axles, and we had them upgraded to what they call the fast axles. And the difference was quite considerable. It was a lot quieter, a lot smoother on the highway, and it now sits quite happily at about 90-95 kilometers per hour, very comfortably. It's got one diff lock on the back, on the rear only, and we have rarely used that, to be honest. For several years before we even got this vehicle or started building it, we've been going to all the shows and looking at all the different designs and cherry picking the bits we liked and the bits we didn't like, and we'd met lots of people who'd helped us out and shown us their vehicles. Our German friends used to laugh at us. We'd always be walking around with a tape measure and a pen and paper, writing things down. And we knew that we wanted to create an interior that felt roomy. It had space in it, light and area, not enclosed. We knew we wanted a fixed double bed, and we knew we wanted a seating area that would seat 5 or 6 people comfortably around a table. So, with that in mind, Pat, who's really the designer more than me, started putting together her ideas.
Yeah, I mean, we actually mocked it up on our front room floor. We taped it all out. We actually put chairs in to see where we would sit on the toilet and
cardboard
where
boxes.
The windows were, cardboard boxes. And in fact, it wasn't until we actually had to come to sell our house that we actually took this tape away. We just kept it there for about a year because it was a dream, and also it was a visualization that we could see. And I'm actually a very visual person, so even though I knew the millimetre perfect how I wanted things, I had to actually see it as well. I would also say that we went to a lot of shows and we did lots of talks with people, and also we went to see some converters, and we were looking for someone to build the box for us because we felt that it was such a big investment and we wanted to do it right. So we went to quite a few, got lots of quotes, and some were really out of our price range. And then we came across Overlanding, who actually sort of said, we can do what you want, we can customise it how you want, there's no set ways, you can have a crawl through if you want, you can have this, you can have that, it's totally up to you what you choose. And that's why we went with Overlanding.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the features we've put in it, we've really liked. For instance, over our bed, right over our bed is a hatch about 1 metre square that opens up to 90 degrees. So you can, it's handy for getting on the roof to clean the solar panels and things, but also you can lay in bed and look at the stars. So that was good. And the crawl throughs worked really well. We can lock the crawl through really securely with a full thickness door and make it secure, which is very handy for when you're leaving it stationary and also for shipping.
And actually, I could crawl through it. I've actually gone through it quite a few times. It's not my favourite thing, but I can do it. And that was the most important thing, was that it had to be usable, but secure. So it is really great in that way. That's worked really well.
We're very pleased with it. We often get asked, we even ask ourselves, what would you change in the overall design? And although there's a few little elements here and there we might change, in the overall design, I don't think we'd change anything. And that's because we spent so long mocking it up and taping it on the floor, as Pat said. And I would definitely advise anybody who's in the planning stages to do that. Because we changed our mind so many times in that period, and eventually we were happy with it, and we've still remained happy with it.
I think things that I wanted was the departure angle. I worked on that quite a bit, saying it had to be this way. We mocked it all up when we was at Ormacar and said, okay, we're going to go for this. And we did. In retrospect, Neil feels it would have been better if we just had a square back, because firstly, we've never used the departure angle to that much. Secondly, the bike and the tyres are up a little bit higher because of the angle.
Yeah.
And thirdly, he loses quite a lot of storage. So I think that really these lorries are quite tall anyhow, so we could have got away with that. Now, going for the construction of the box, we used to have a motorhome that was quite cold and drafty, so we said we wanted 60 mil. And
Of insulation.
And Ormacar sort of laughed at it, saying, you're going to be too, it's going to be too warm, we don't need that. I said, no, I want 60 mil definitely. So we had the foam, and then we had GRP liners on the outside edge, a laminate, and one was on the outside was 3 mil and inside was 2 mil. So it brought us to about 62 mil in the end. And the floor was a bit deeper. We went for, I think it was 60 in foam, and then we had a 15 mil or 25 mil.
15 mil of ply.
It came to 85 mil. So it had a real solid floor, which really helped. So that was that really.
The whole box with vehicle chassis, like they call them a ladder chassis on vehicles like ours, they're designed to twist all over the show. And if you strap a plastic box onto a rigid chassis and go over some hills and twist it side to side, you'll break it. So you've got to mount everything onto what's called a torsion-free subframe. And now there's different designs for that, and we chose one of the tried and tested methods of a rail-on-rail system. So the whole cabin sits on its own subframe, which is galvanized steel, which in turn sits on the original vehicle chassis, and it's on a spring basis, so it can tip side to side independently of the vehicle chassis. So it takes all that twist out of it, and we found it perfectly good. It's adjustable. We can add stronger springs, we can remove springs. We haven't adjusted it yet because it feels okay, but it gives us that little bit of extra flexibility.
I actually say that the vehicle actually came with a 3-point torsion-free frame, and that would have been really the way to go. However, a few of our friends had that, and the vehicle just wobbled quite a bit.
A bit too sloppy.
The suspension was a bit sloppy. Also, it was a very old system, so the rubber mounts and things were, near 25 years old at this point. And also, by doing this and coming down to the rail on rail, it actually made us a good sort of 150 mil shorter, which is really important because we're quite tall anyhow. We're just under 3.5, we're sort of 3.45 meters tall. And ideally, if you can design one, 3.3 would have been better, but there's no way. We wanted the headroom actually in the cabin. And one of the criteria was that if I sat in the bed, I could sit up in bed on top of the frame of the carriage, and my head didn't hit the ceiling, and I could drink a cup of tea. So that was the technicality of how we measured it, especially with the mattress as well on top.
So inside the vehicle, from end to end, inside the cabin, we are exactly 5 meters inside, internal. were just under 1,950 millimeters floor to ceiling, and I think it's 2,300 millimeters walls side to side internally inside. So it is quite a good size. I don't feel it's small. In fact, sometimes externally we often think it's a bit too big, really, don't we?
Yeah, but we just thought we're designing this for world travel for a long time, and we wanted it to be our home. We wanted to be comfortable in it, and we don't like roughing it really. So a lot of thought went into design. In fact, we argued about lots of millimeters.
Every millimeter.
Yeah, if you want it in the kitchen, then you can't have it in the front room, or the bed has to be smaller. I mean, we compromised and made the bed 1.40 meters.
Yeah, 1.5 meters.
Which is a continental sort of size. Originally, we were going to be 150 or 160, but I know you sleep in bed, but you do sit in your chairs quite a lot. So it was important that we could have 1.30 in the chair length, so we could put our feet out and long. So
one of the things we did discover going around all the shows and everything was that sometimes access into the cabin was quite tough, especially for Pat, who's had some knee surgery. It was quite tough. So we knew that the steps going in and out of the cabin were very, very important, and that a ladder type situation wasn't for us. So we did a bit of research, and if you've got a bad knee, it's coming down steps that are too big that causes you problem, as opposed to going up them. So we put in 6 steps from our floor height down to the outside ground level. Now, 3 of the steps are in a drop-down box within the cabin. So the first 3 are inside, and then the remaining 3 steps come out on a retractable step, an American company called Quickie Step. And it's an electric step. You push the button and it comes out 3 steps. And the last step floats just above ground level. So even if you're on a little bit of uneven ground, it's just off the ground, and you don't have to worry about putting legs down or anything like that. And it's actually worked out really well. They're very, very good steps. Even though it's a big truck and it's got quite a payload on it, you still have to be mindful of the weight you're putting into it. So the internal furniture we constructed with a lightweight ply made from a wood called poplar. It's 14mm sheet material laminated on both sides. And the furniture was constructed outside the vehicle in a workshop we had, and then transferred in. Sometimes it had to be constructed, deconstructed and reconstructed inside the vehicle and mounted inside. All the cupboards are mounted about 5mm off the back wall and 5mm off the ceiling if they touch the ceiling. And this allows an airflow through the cupboards even if the doors are shut. And it has worked. It wasn't our idea. We saw it on other vehicles, and it has worked. We've not had any issues with any damp or mildew or anything going on in our cupboards, and it's worked very well.
Okay. And we actually use Southcote latches, which are really brilliant. They're so robust. We've not had one go yet. You slam the door and it just shuts it and holds it tight. Yeah. They've been fantastic. They're quite expensive. And we had, I think, 36 of them. So it was quite a lot to use those, but it paid off. Now going back to the actual bed design, obviously we have the GRP frame already in, but we mounted the bed on some Froley. And we used it was like a sort of handspring mechanism, and we went for the next grade up because we were overweight, and they said the travel one don't quite work for you. So actually I think it's about 6.5 centimeters off higher. But it means that your bed's not actually touching the surface and the mattress. And then in front of the bed, where our furniture actually comes up, we put some holes in. We drew really big. Drilled really big holes, and on the opposite side of the bed, there's actually a radiator there, and also
another air gap,
and a big air gap about 20mm. So actually, when you're in bed, you roll about, and it's drawing air in from one side to the other, and also it's heated there as well. So if we ever do put the heating on, hasn't got no damp cold patches, and we've not had any condensation whatsoever under the bed, so that's worked really, really well.
The kitchen worktop's made of Corian, and we've managed to gain some extra space by having a flap that folds flat over the cooker. And when we use the cooker, this flap opens right over 180 degrees and sits like a bar flap across the door. And this just doubled our worktop space. And when we're not using it, it simply folds down to the vertical down the side of the cooker.
And we've got a dual sink, we've got twin sinks, which works really, really well, because if you want to save water, we use this sort of small, tiny sink. Or if we're really lazy and we've got all the washing up in the big one, we've still got the small one that we can use. It's worked really, really well.
Our main table in the living area is made of exactly the same material, and we can move it. It's on a center post base, and we can move it in all directions, which is quite handy because you can slide it right out of the way when you want to get in the bed. It also gives us the ability to use that table. We can drop it down to seat height, and with a bit of rearranging of a few cushions, we can make up another good size double bed, which is handy, but we haven't used it very much, but it is there should we need it. Our bathroom's at the front of the vehicle, and it has the shower area and toilet all in one small room. The walls for the bathroom were made in GRP. I think it was about 30mm GRP internal walls, but we wanted to give it more of a sort of wet room bathroom feel about it, so we had the walls lined with a very shiny laminate called Lamilux, and it really does look nice bathroom feel about it. The floor, the shower area, which is the area you step into when you go into the bathroom, we made that shower tray ourselves in wood, and it's made up of 4 panels that all angle down towards a drain that goes straight out through the floor, and the whole floor area has then been lined with a non-slip vinyl that's got a sort of granular feel about it, and it has all worked out really quite well. One of the problems we did have, though, was that the grey tank, which is at the rear of the vehicle, is high up under the chassis, and of course the shower drain is only maybe about 100mm higher than that at the front of the vehicle in the floor. So if the vehicle was tipped slightly nose down, maybe we'd parked on a slight incline, the water from the shower wasn't making it back to the tank in the rear. So we decided to try different ways of dealing with this, and one of the ways we tried was we put in a lower sump that had a pump operated by a float switch, and it worked well for a while. The water from the shower drained into the sump, and the pump kicked in and pumped it up into the tank, but it just constantly was getting clogged up with debris from soaps and so forth and various sort of bits and pieces, and it became a bit of a nightmare. So we scrapped all that and introduced a proper shower pump made by a company called Jabsco. This has worked brilliantly, and we activate it in the shower itself. I've got an infrared switch that you simply just wave your hand over whilst having a shower, and the pump kicks in for 30 seconds and drains everything away and shoots it all to the tank at the back, and that's worked out really well.
I'd just like to say actually that even though we designed it as a wet room, we actually do use a circular type shower curtain so that it doesn't actually get the whole bit wet, because it works great, and it's a big enough shower that the curtain doesn't actually touch you. It works brilliantly. I love the wet room. It's really great. Now coming to the toilet, we actually chose a Thetford Bavura low-seated toilet that goes onto a waste tank, a black waste tank of 60 to 65 litres of black waste. Now we designed this in the same sort of material we used in the water tanks, which would be a 10mm food grade high density polyurethane. The toilet is actually vented, and we don't use any chemicals at all, so it is really great that way. We can actually go 3 weeks without emptying it if we're really careful and we haven't had a dose of diarrhea. Now, to actually empty it, we actually empty it outside the vehicle. We've got a flange on it that we can use a cartridge, and we can decant that and take it, especially if we're not anywhere near where we want to actually dump the waste. We don't have to be right where the vehicle is. We could actually use an American style pipe, but we didn't want to carry that. And actually, we've used the cartridge system before, and the fact that we can do 4 cartridges off if we had to, we don't leave it that long, but it just gives us great resourcefulness that if we want to go 3 weeks, we're not panicking that we haven't emptied the toilet.
Our cabin heating comes primarily from a 10 kilowatt Eberspacher hydronic heater. We've got a wet system in there. We've got radiators throughout the whole cabin and a couple of the matrix fan heaters to put out some heat. And it also heats up through a coil in our calorifier. It heats up our hot water as well. We've overcomplicated this system, if I'm honest, by introducing a room thermostat and a tank thermostat and a 7-day timer. The reality is that we just turn it on for 10 minutes, get warm and turn it off again. And it's because of the insulation in the cabin, it'll stay warm till tomorrow at that point. We can also heat the cabin and the hot water from our engine via a plate exchanger. The coolant in the engine and the coolant in our central heating system don't actually touch. They sort of kiss each other at this plate exchanger, and that works absolutely fine. And we can reverse all that, so we can actually preheat the engine from the Eberspacher as well if we need to. When we designed the heating system, we took advice from Eberspacher, and we were very lucky. One of the technical guys came and visited us twice to help us out with the design and even a little bit of the installation. And he recommended that we put in a 10 kilowatt heater, which is sounds like a complete overkill. But what they were working on was the fact that at high altitude, maybe over about 3,500 meters, it won't be running at 10 kilowatts. It might only be running at about 3 kilowatts. And they felt that we needed at least that to be able to preheat the engine. Another reason for choosing the 10 kilowatt version of the Eberspacher as opposed to the 5 was that the 10 kilowatt has built-in altitude compensation. It's actually built into the system as opposed to an add-on that you had to do with the 5. Eberspacher claimed that it's good up to about 4,000 meters, and we've done this many times. In fact, we have had it running at over 5,000 meters. Sometimes it doesn't fire up instantly. It takes a couple of goes to get going, but it has fired up. And if you run it at a very low setting, maybe down to about 800 watts, 1,000 watts, it will tick over quite happily at 5,000 meters. When we're heating the cabin, we can distribute the heat evenly throughout the whole cabin, or we can focus it, which we often do, into our bathroom area. And we do this quite often when we're driving. We put all the heat into the bathroom area, and we can use it as a drying room, and it works absolutely brilliant. So once we've done a load of washing, we can hang it up in the bathroom, drive for an hour, and it's perfectly dry again. We tried to keep the electrics as simple as we could. The vehicle itself runs in 24 volts. So we had this idea we could keep everything in 24 volts. That didn't work out. So we've ended up with 24 volts and 12. And then obviously in addition to that, through an inverter, we have 220 volts to quite a number of sockets throughout the vehicle. We kept everything separate. So we've got a separate solar system with solar chargers that charge the battery. We've got a mains charger that's completely separate. And we have a battery to battery charger. So that links charging from the engine to the battery, that's completely separate. And our inverter as well is a completely separate item. And the reason behind this was that we thought that by keeping things separate, although it took a lot more fitting and a lot more wiring, that if one system failed, we'd still have the ability to use the other systems. So if the mains charger that we plug into shore power failed, we could still charge with our solar. We have a 260 amp hour battery bank made up of 4 Victron gel deep cycle batteries running at 24 volt. We try not to plug into a mains charging. It's only occasionally we do that, and most of our charging actually comes from the solar on the roof of the vehicle. We've got 3 panels up there totaling 700 watts at 24 volt. 2 of the panels go through a Morningstar charger, and 1 of the panels goes through a Victron charger. And the reason we've done this was because we actually lost a panel. We damaged a panel in Chile, and when we went to replace it, they weren't compatible, so we had to introduce a brand new extra charging system. So it's just an additional charging source. But Sometimes you think maybe that's quite good, so all our eggs aren't in one basket, so if one charger fails, we still have got an input from the other side. The solar charging keeps up with our needs pretty much most of the time. It's only in very low light that we have a problem after a few days, but most of the time it works perfectly well. The shore charging is a Xantrex True Charge 30 amp charger, and this has also worked very well. It works between 90 volts and 265 volts, and I think about 45 hertz to 60 something hertz. So it makes it truly a worldwide charger. We can plug in anywhere and charge. Then in addition to this, we have a battery to battery charger that connects power coming from our engine, from our alternator, through to our leisure batteries in the back. Originally we had a Sterling one, but this failed and it was nothing but grief. It gave us a lot of trouble, and we've recently changed that to a Victron one, and so far the Victron battery to battery charger looks like it's working really well. The inverter is made by Votronic. It's an 1800 watt sinus inverter. It's capable of running at 1800 watts all day, but it will peak up to about 3500 watts for very short periods. Our 220 volt power consumption is not very high. I think the highest thing we have is a plug-in radiator about 800 watts. So this suits us perfectly. In general, we're pretty pleased with our electric setup. It seems to suit us okay. We can go for, easily for 3 or 4 days in low light with very little charging. We can get through that. And if we get just a couple of hours of good light every day, we can go indefinitely. That's more than enough to keep up with our needs. The biggest drain on the system is our refrigerator, which uses about 2.5 amps an hour, and obviously it's running all day, and in the hot countries it's running 24/7, but it tends to keep up with it. If we've got a good bit of sunshine, maybe 2 or 3 hours of sunshine every day, then we can go indefinitely. When we've got a lot of solar power and the batteries are full, we often use our 220 volts to cook using a desktop cooker called a Ramoska, and we even run a washing machine quite happily on it. We've bypassed the electric element on the washing machine, and we introduce hot water from our calorifier, and it doesn't use a lot of power at all. Actually, it's really quite good. The electric element we've got in our 15-litre calorifier doesn't use much power either. We have to put that on for about 15 minutes every day, and we've got enough water then to last us for the whole day, couple of showers and washing up, etc. So we're pretty happy with it. Obviously, if it's low light, or we're not going to drive, or we haven't got any shore power, then we have to be a little bit more frugal and not use some of these appliances.
On designing the water tanks, I really, the requirement was I wanted 500 litres. So I designed that we would have 2 tanks transverse across the vehicle, just at sort of the rear axle level. These were designed in 10mm food grade high density polyurethane, and they have 4 inspection hatches in each tank, which means that we can get in and actually clean all round the tank. And when we put it in storage, we actually leave them off, and they actually vent quite well and dry the tanks. We found it very hard actually to get the tanks in the UK, and we actually got them in Germany, and they were actually a quarter of the price, and they could do it to the specification we wanted. The idea to have 2 tanks as well was the fact that we tend to only fill one, or we fill them half and half, but if we have sort of water that could be a bit dodgy, we only use 1 tank, and another tank doesn't get contaminated, so it gives us the resources that we can actually say, okay, we're not going to fill that tank today, or if you want to just split the weight a bit more, doing 2 half loads in the tank works out really well.
The tanks are really strong, very, very tough, and Pat designed it that it was going to actually become the base of our main seat. We've got a U-shaped lounge area, and one of the seats that goes sideways across the vehicle is built onto the water tanks. They are the base of it, and they take all the strength of the seat. So it's worked out really well. All the water that comes out of the tanks goes through several filter systems and strainers. It first of all goes through quite a coarse strainer and through a pump. The pump's activated simply by a drop of pressure in the system. So you turn the tap on, the pump kicks in. All the water then passes through a paper element that filters down to about 20 microns. This really is just to take out things you can see, like bits of soil, bits of dirt, maybe some rust out some pipes and things like that. Then again, after that, it passes through a carbon filter, and this is simply there to maybe take out some of the bad taste that might be in the water. It doesn't take out salinity. If it's salty water, there's nothing we can do about that, but it does take out some if there's a bit of bad taste. And all the water goes through those filters. In addition to that, our drinking water, which you can pour from separate taps within the kitchen and the bathroom area, goes through a filter called a Seagull 4, made by an American company called General Ecology. This filters down to 0.4 of a micron, which is pretty low. And so far as we know, we've not had any problems. I must admit the water always tastes pretty good out of this filter, and we've been using this now for several years, and it seems to work okay. We've got a relatively small grey water tank. It's only about 60 litres, and it sits under the chassis towards the rear of the vehicle, quite high up, so it's really directly underneath the floor below the garage. And we don't carry grey water. We dispose of grey water almost on a daily basis. This tank's not heated or insulated in any way, so if we find ourselves in freezing conditions, what we do is we simply leave the tap open on it and stick a bucket under the tap, so it drains straight out and into our bucket. The original fuel tanks on the vehicle, I think, were about 70-80 litres, which clearly is not enough for overlanding purposes. So it was discarded, and we put on two tanks. One is about 350 litres, that's our primary tank, and an auxiliary tank on the other side of 150. The auxiliary tank simply feeds the primary tank when the level gets a bit low. This potentially gives us a range of about between 2,000 and 2,500 kilometres. However, what we've discovered is that bad roads and altitude can reduce this greatly. We don't really know what we get out of a full tank, but I suspect that on our travels in South America it's been a lot less than that. We made the tanks from mild steel. We felt this was the better material because of repairs. We felt that if we did get a hole in it, a stone or something had gone through it, the chances of finding somebody that could weld steel was far greater than, say, stainless steel or aluminium. We put two plates under each tank, one under each tank as a stone guard, like a bash plate. And I think it's the best thing we've ever done because they are both smashed to pieces. There are great big dents in these bash plates from our journeys, and those dents would have been in our tanks. So that's protected them greatly. In addition to the fuel tanks, we also added an additional filter called a CPAR filter, and this serves two purposes. One, it's a very fine filter, so it filters out some of the particles that you get, especially in some diesel. I mean, Bolivian diesel was really dirty, and the filter had to work overtime there. But it's also very good at separating water. It has a sort of centrifugal bit in it, and it separates out water into a bowl that can be drained off and prevents that from ever reaching your engine. Another modification that we did before we set off was that the springs on the back of the vehicle, which are leaf springs, 2 stacks on each side, had become a bit sad through age. So we had several of the leaves replaced with new ones and several of the other ones refurbished, heated up and retempered, etc. And we even added a couple of extra leaves on each side just to give it a slight extra height and give it a bit more firmness on the back end. Gas is our main fuel for cooking. We've got an 80 litre fixed tank under the rear of the vehicle that you fill up at various gas depots. It lasts quite a long time. It lasts well over a year when we fill it up, so it hasn't been a big problem trying to find gas. Inside the vehicle we've got a full-size cooker with 4-ring burner, a grill and an oven, and this has worked perfectly well. In addition to this, we can cook using a tabletop style oven called a Ramoska, which is electric, and we can do this running through our inverter. We use electric toaster, electric kettle, and a slow cooker, which is good for when the meat's a bit tough. You can put that on all day and make a good meal out of it.
And outside, we actually have a 2-ring cooker in a locker that comes down.
We do.
And we use that most of the time because we do try to cook outside. And we have 2 gas barbecue points, one next to the cooker on this side, and on the opposite side of the vehicle, we have another one in case we wanted to move the cooker around away from the wind. We actually do carry a gas barbecue as well, which if we were stationary for a long while, we have had it out and we've used it. But for the rest of the time, it's just too much hassle. And we actually have a small barbecue with wood that we use instead.
Yeah. We wanted to carry 2 spare tyres on their rims and a motorcycle on the back of the truck, which is quite a lot of weight. And because the cabin itself's constructed with GRP, we couldn't actually hang any other weight on the cabin. So everything had to come from the chassis. So it's quite a meaty construction that we've built on the back, and it comes up from the chassis and creates a platform that everything sits on. To get everything off, we have a crane arm that swings round into place, and it'll lift the motorcycle off first and then lift the tyres off. Now, originally I had an electric hoist that lifted stuff on and off, and I didn't like it. I was never comfortable with it at all. It was always quite a frightening moment. So about 2 years ago now, I replaced that with a hand chain hoist, the sort you'd lift an engine out of a car with, and that has been so much better. It takes about 10 minutes to get the motorcycle off the back and probably about 20 minutes to put it back on, but it has worked out fine. I always promised Pat that we'd have air conditioning in the front cab, but obviously these old vehicles, they don't come with air conditioning, so we had to look at how we could fit it. We didn't want a rooftop one, that would ruin the roof. So we looked at having one integrated into the engine with a compressor, etc. And we managed, luckily enough, we managed to get an entire kit from a British military auction for about 350 quid. The evaporator that came with the kit was huge. It was obviously designed to cool a bus or something like that. And we've only got a couple of cubic meters of air in the front, so that we got rid of that. We sold that and we bought a much smaller evaporator that sits quite nicely under the dashboard. The condenser mounts on top of the cab and tilts with the cab. The compressor was quite a tricky bit. We had to do some moving of the water pump on the engine, etc. And a good friend of ours did all the work for that, recreated new brackets and things, and we managed to line that up with a spare slot on the bottom crank pulley. It works fantastic. We wouldn't be without it. Even in the hottest parts of Brazil, it has just been the best thing we ever fitted.